Her closest guy friend mocked me at lunch saying she's way too hot for me, so I silenced him in front of everyone, but when she yelled, "Say sorry or I'm gone," I just grinned and stayed quiet. What happened when she came crawling back weeks later taught me everything I needed to know about loyalty and consequences. I'm a civil engineer, 32 years old, and I've always believed that solid foundations matter whether you're building bridges or relationships, but sometimes you discover that what you thought was bedrock was actually quicksand all along. For 4 years, I thought Emma and I had built something real together, something worth investing in, but I learned the hard way that some people see generosity as weakness and commitment as control. Emma was this incredibly talented graphic designer, 28, working on her master's degree in digital arts while I quietly handled the financial reality that made her dreams possible, paying her $80,000 tuition without making her feel like she owed me anything because I genuinely believed we were building a future together. She had this infectious creativity, this way of seeing beauty in the mundane that made me fall for her completely, and I loved watching her work late into the night on projects that lit up her entire face with passion and purpose. The problem was Tyler, her childhood friend who'd been lurking around the edges of our relationship like a persistent stain I could never quite clean away, constantly reminding Emma of her wild college days with Brett, some traveling musician who'd abandoned her when things got serious, leaving her broken and bitter about commitment until I came along. Tyler was 29, a struggling photographer who worked at some artsy coffee shop downtown, barely scraping by on promotional shots for local bands while positioning himself as Emma's emotional support system and artistic conscience, always ready with subtle digs about how my stable career and conventional lifestyle were somehow stifling her creative spirit. Emma defended him constantly, claiming he'd been there during her darkest moments after Brett left, that he understood the artistic soul in ways I never could, and I bit my tongue every time because I loved her and trusted that our relationship was strong enough to weather one jealous friend's interference. What I didn't realize was how systematically Tyler had been poisoning her against me, painting my financial support as control, my reliability as boring predictability, my love as possession, all while positioning himself as the understanding artist who truly appreciated her talents and potential. Looking back, I can see how he played the long game, always available when Emma needed someone to vent to about the pressures of graduate school, always ready with stories about Brett's spontaneous adventures and creative freedom, always there to suggest that maybe she'd settled for security instead of following her heart. I thought I was building our future by investing in her education and dreams, but Tyler convinced her I was buying her compliance, that real love meant accepting chaos and uncertainty instead of providing stability and support, and Emma started viewing my generosity through his warped lens of manipulation and control. 3 months into what would become the most important project of my career, I finally landed the contract I'd been chasing for 2 years, designing a revolutionary eco-friendly housing development that would establish my reputation nationally and validate every long hour I'd spent perfecting sustainable building techniques that most firms considered too experimental and risky. The Meridian Green project represented everything I'd worked toward, a chance to prove that environmental responsibility and structural innovation could coexist profitably, and when the clients chose my proposal over 3 established architectural giants, I felt like I was finally stepping into the professional legacy I'd been building since graduate school. This wasn't just another commercial contract, this was the project that would define the next decade of my career, the kind of opportunity that transforms a competent engineer into an industry leader, and I wanted to celebrate with the people who'd supported me through months of 18-hour days and constant revisions that had tested every limit of my technical knowledge and creative problem-solving abilities. I reserved the rooftop terrace at Elevation, this elegant restaurant downtown with panoramic city views, and invited my closest professional colleagues who'd provided technical expertise, my mentor who'd recommended me for the project, and my core group of friends who'd endured my obsessive focus on environmental impact calculations and load-bearing innovations for the better part of a year. The atmosphere was perfect as servers brought out champagne that actually cost more than Tyler made in a week, and for the first time in months I felt myself genuinely relaxing, laughing at stories from my colleague David about our disastrous early attempts at green building design, enjoying the warm satisfaction of recognition from people whose opinions I respected and valued. Against my better judgment, I told Emma she could invite her friends, knowing Tyler would inevitably appear with his perpetual attitude of artistic superiority and thinly veiled contempt for anyone who'd achieved financial stability through conventional career paths, but I was feeling generous with success and didn't want Emma to feel excluded from this milestone moment that represented years of dedication and sacrifice. Tyler arrived exactly as I'd expected, wearing his standard uniform of deliberately distressed jeans and a vintage band t-shirt that screamed studied casualness, immediately gravitating toward the expensive champagne while launching into his predictable commentary about corporate sellouts versus real artists who maintain their integrity by rejecting mainstream success and commercial compromise. I watched him work the table, dropping names of local musicians he'd photographed and art collectives he'd joined, positioning himself as the authentic creative voice among a group of boring professionals who'd traded their souls for steady paychecks and health insurance. And I felt that familiar tension building in my shoulders as he began what I recognized as his standard performance of intellectual and artistic superiority. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was drinking champagne I'd paid for while lecturing my successful colleagues about the spiritual poverty of conventional achievement, but I kept my mouth shut because this was my celebration and I refused to let his insecurity and jealousy poison what should have been one of the best nights of my professional life. The alcohol hit Tyler faster than his common sense, and within an hour he'd transformed from subtle undermining to outright performance art, holding court near the champagne table while my colleagues exchanged increasingly uncomfortable glances as he launched into his manifesto about how real artists see the world through a lens of authentic emotion and raw truth that corporate types could never understand or appreciate. "You guys just don't get it," he said, gesturing wildly with his third glass of Dom Perignon. "Artists like Emma and me, we're connected to something deeper than profit margins and building codes. We create beauty that touches souls while you people just chase money and convince yourselves you're making the world better." I felt David shift beside me, probably wondering why I'd invited this pretentious coffee shop photographer to celebrate a project that would house thousands of families sustainably, but I stayed calm because Tyler was about to hang himself with his own rope and I wanted to give him plenty of slack to work with. "I mean, no offense to anyone here," Tyler continued, his voice carrying that particular brand of fake sincerity that precedes genuine offense, "but Emma's an artist, a real creative force, and she needs someone who understands her soul, not just someone who can pay her bills." The entire table had gone quiet now, 12 successful professionals watching this train wreck unfold while Emma stared at her plate, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment but notably not defending me or shutting down Tyler's increasingly aggressive commentary about our relationship dynamics and my apparent inadequacy as a romantic partner. That's when Tyler made his fatal mistake, turning directly toward Emma with the confidence of someone who'd been planning this moment for months, his voice carrying across the silent terrace like a declaration of war. "I just want you to be happy, Em, but honestly," he paused for dramatic effect, making sure everyone was listening, "she's way too hot for you, Mark." The silence that followed was deafening, 12 pairs of eyes shifting between Tyler's smirking face, Emma's mortified expression, and my completely calm demeanor as I absorbed what had just happened at my own celebration dinner, surrounded by my professional colleagues who just witnessed someone openly disrespect me in the most humiliating way possible. Emma looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor, but she wasn't defending me or telling Tyler to shut up, she was just embarrassed by the scene he was causing, not outraged by the disrespect he was showing her boyfriend who'd been nothing but generous and supportive for 4 years. I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest, that same methodical focus I brought to complex engineering problems, and I realized Tyler had just handed me the perfect opportunity to systematically destroy him in front of everyone who mattered to me, using nothing but facts and logic to expose him as the jealous, parasitic failure he'd always been. The patient engineer in me transformed into a strategic predator, and Tyler had no idea he'd just triggered someone who spent his days solving problems through careful analysis and precise execution, someone who understood that the most devastating attacks come not from anger but from calm, methodical exposure of uncomfortable truths. I set down my champagne glass with deliberate precision, stood up slowly, and turned to face Tyler with the same calm confidence I brought to client presentations, letting the silence stretch until everyone at the table was hanging on my next words. That's an interesting perspective, Tyler, I said, my voice carrying just enough warmth to sound conversational rather than confrontational, but I'm curious about something. What exactly makes a better man for Emma in your professional opinion? Tyler's smirk faltered slightly, but he doubled down with typical arrogance. Someone who understands her artistic soul, who supports her creativity instead of trying to control it with money, someone who gets what it means to live authentically instead of selling out for corporate success. I nodded thoughtfully, as if seriously considering his profound insights about authentic living and artistic integrity, while my colleagues watched this exchange with the fascination of people witnessing a perfectly executed demolition. So financial support is controlling, I mused aloud. Then I suppose Emma should know that her $80,000 graduate tuition, which I pay in full every semester without expecting anything in return, is actually me manipulating her with money rather than investing in her dreams and future career prospects. The color drained from Tyler's face as he realized where this was heading, but I was just getting started, methodically laying out facts like evidence in a court case. And I guess when I bought her that Honda Civic last year because her old car kept breaking down and she needed reliable transportation to campus and her internship, that was also financial manipulation rather than practical problem solving from someone who cares about her safety and success. Emma was staring at me now with wide eyes, probably realizing for the first time how thoroughly Tyler had reframed my generosity as control, but I continued my systematic destruction of his credibility with surgical precision. The mortgage on our condo downtown, which costs $2,800 a month and gives Emma the space and quiet she needs for her design work, I suppose that's also controlling behavior rather than providing the stable environment that creative people need to focus on their craft without worrying about basic survival. Tyler opened his mouth to interrupt, but I held up one finger with the authority of someone who'd commanded construction sites and client meetings, and he actually shut up. But here's what really interests me, Tyler. You talk about supporting Emma's creativity, so I'm wondering how much of your coffee shop wages you've contributed to her education, her career development, or even her basic living expenses over the past 4 years? The table was dead silent now, professional colleagues who understood balance sheets and cash flow watching me dismantle Tyler's entire worldview with simple mathematics and uncomfortable facts. Because according to Emma, she's loaned you money 17 times in the past 2 years to cover your rent when photography gigs fell through, which means I've been indirectly funding your lifestyle while you position yourself as the authentic artist who's above conventional measures of success and responsibility. Tyler's face went from pale to red as he realized everyone was staring at him, seeing him clearly for the first time as a financial parasite who'd been manipulating Emma's guilt and nostalgia to extract resources from our relationship. Your photography career, which you hold up as superior to my corporate sellout existence, consists primarily of shooting promotional photos for local bands who pay you barely enough to cover rent in your studio apartment that Emma helps subsidize, while I've invested over $150,000 in Emma's future and our shared life together. I picked up my champagne glass again, taking a slow sip while Tyler stood there speechless, his entire identity as Emma's artistic champion and superior romantic option crumbling under basic financial scrutiny. So when you say she's too hot for me, I assume you mean she's too hot for someone who provides stability, invests in her dreams, treats her as an equal partner, and builds a foundation for our future together, and you're absolutely right that I can't compete with someone who offers emotional manipulation, financial dependence, and the romantic appeal of perpetual struggle and uncertainty. The aftermath of my systematic destruction of Tyler should have been Emma's moment to finally see him clearly, to recognize how he'd been poisoning her against the man who'd invested everything in their shared future, but instead she exploded with fury that caught me completely off guard with its misdirected intensity and misplaced loyalty. "How could you humiliate him like that in front of everyone?" she hissed, standing up so fast her chair nearly toppled backward, her face flushed with anger that should have been directed at Tyler for disrespecting me, not at me for defending myself with facts and logic. "Tyler's been my friend since childhood, he was there when I had nobody, and you just destroyed him publicly because your ego couldn't handle one stupid comment that he didn't even mean seriously." I stared at her in genuine disbelief, processing the fact that she was more upset about Tyler's humiliation than she was about his deliberate disrespect of our relationship in front of my most important professional colleagues, more concerned with protecting his feelings than acknowledging how he'd systematically undermined our relationship for years. "Emma," he told a table full of my colleagues, "that you're too hot for me," at my own celebration dinner, after spending the evening lecturing them about how I'm a corporate sellout who doesn't understand your artistic soul. How is that something I should just ignore? But Emma was beyond rational discussion, her voice rising as she transformed from embarrassed girlfriend to Tyler's fierce protector, choosing sides in a conflict where the choice should have been obvious to anyone who understood loyalty and basic respect. "You need to apologize to Tyler right now," she demanded, crossing her arms and glaring at me with the kind of ultimatum energy that I'd never seen from her before. "Say you're sorry for embarrassing him, or I'm walking out of here and we're done forever." The entire table was watching this unfold like a car accident, my professional colleagues witnessing what should have been my moment of triumph transform into relationship drama that revealed everything about Emma's true priorities and where her loyalty actually lay when forced to choose. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest as I realized this wasn't about Tyler's comment or my response. This was about Emma choosing to defend the man who'd been systematically trying to destroy our relationship instead of standing by the partner who'd sacrificed everything to support her dreams and build their future together. The ultimatum hung in the air between us like a death sentence for our relationship, and I understood with perfect clarity that Emma had already made her choice the moment she decided Tyler's feelings mattered more than my dignity, his comfort more than our commitment, his version of events more than the obvious truth everyone at the table had witnessed. I looked at Emma's flushed, angry face, then at Tyler standing behind her like a wounded child waiting for his protector to fix his problems, then at my colleagues who were pretending to study their champagne glasses while absorbing every word of this relationship-ending drama. Without anger, without argument, without any attempt to negotiate or explain why her demand was completely unreasonable, I picked up my wine glass, smiled at Emma with genuine sadness for what we were losing, and said simply, "I hope Tyler makes you as happy as you deserve to be." Then I walked away from the table, away from 4 years of investment and commitment, away from the woman who'd just chosen her childhood friend over her life partner, leaving Emma standing alone with her ultimatum and the dawning realization that sometimes when you force someone to choose, they pick the option you didn't expect. Emma moved in with Tyler that same night, probably expecting me to come crawling back within days with desperate apologies and promises to be more understanding of their special friendship, but instead I went completely silent and began the methodical process of dismantling our shared life with the same systematic precision I brought to engineering projects. For 3 weeks, I didn't answer her calls, didn't respond to her increasingly frantic texts, didn't engage with her social media posts about new chapters and authentic living, choosing instead to focus on the practical reality of separating 4 years of intertwined finances and shared commitments. I packed every single item that belonged to her, from the expensive art supplies I'd bought for her graduate projects to the designer clothes she'd accumulated with my credit cards, boxing everything carefully and storing it in my spare bedroom until I could arrange proper delivery to Tyler's cramped studio apartment. The locks were changed within 48 hours, the security system updated to remove her access codes, and her name removed from every account, membership, and service that I'd been paying for during our relationship, effectively erasing her presence from my carefully organized life with the efficiency of someone who understood that clean breaks heal faster than prolonged negotiations. But the real satisfaction came from making 3 specific phone calls that would teach Emma the difference between taking someone for granted and facing the consequences of choosing poorly when loyalty was tested. The first call was to Dr. Morrison, Emma's graduate program advisor, a woman I developed a professional relationship with after attending several university fundraising events where my company had made substantial donations to the Sustainable Design program where Emma was completing her master's degree. "Dr. Morrison, this is Mark Chin. I need to withdraw the private scholarship funding I've been providing for Emma Williams' final semester, effective immediately due to personal circumstances that make continued financial support impossible." The shock in her voice was immediate, followed by questions about Emma's ability to complete her degree without the $25,000 that covered her remaining tuition, lab fees, and thesis project materials. But I explained calmly that Emma had chosen to end our relationship and would need to find alternative funding sources for her education. The second call was even more satisfying, placed to Jennifer Walsh at Morrison Design Group, The prestigious firm where I'd arranged Emma's dream internship through my professional connections in the sustainable architecture community, a position that could have launched her career and provided the industry experience she needed to transition from student to professional designer. Jennifer, I need to inform you that Emma Williams will not be able to complete her internship placement due to personal conflicts of interest that have developed, and I apologize for any inconvenience this creates for your team's summer project schedule. Jennifer was understandably confused since Emma had been performing well and the internship was supposed to continue through her final semester, but I explained that circumstances had changed and it would be inappropriate for me to continue facilitating professional opportunities for someone who was no longer part of my personal or professional network. The third and final call was to Richard Sterling, the gallery owner who'd been considering Emma's work for an upcoming exhibition showcasing emerging digital artists, an opportunity that existed only because Richard and I had developed a friendship through my involvement in the city's arts funding committee where my company sponsored several annual events. Richard, I need to withdraw my recommendation for Emma Williams' inclusion in the Emerging Artists Showcase. Personal circumstances have changed and I can no longer provide the professional endorsement that my recommendation was based upon. Richard was disappointed since he'd been impressed by Emma's portfolio and the exhibition was only 2 months away, but he understood that professional recommendations were based on personal relationships and trust, both of which had been fundamentally altered by recent events. Each phone call was made without vindictiveness or anger, just the calm implementation of consequences that Emma had never considered when she chose Tyler's comfort over our relationship's foundation, and I felt no guilt about removing opportunities that existed only because of my investment in her future and my professional reputation in the design community. When Emma finally appeared at my door after 3 weeks of experiencing Tyler's chaotic lifestyle firsthand, her key wouldn't work and she found herself standing in the hallway like a stranger, pressing the doorbell repeatedly while I took my time deciding whether to acknowledge her presence at all. She looked terrible, dark circles under her eyes, her clothes wrinkled like she'd been sleeping in them, her usual confident composure replaced by the desperate energy of someone who'd finally realized the magnitude of her mistake but wasn't sure if it could be fixed. "Mark, please, we need to talk," she said through the intercom, her voice cracking with exhaustion and what sounded like genuine panic. "I made a horrible mistake and I need you to understand what really happened that night." I opened the door but didn't invite her inside, leaning against the frame with the calm detachment of someone who'd already processed this relationship's death and moved on to practical concerns about the aftermath and cleanup. "Tyler's been impossible to live with," she continued, the words tumbling out in a rushed confession. "He's broke, his apartment is disgusting, he's angry all the time about money and keeps saying I ruined his friendship with everyone by forcing him into this situation he never actually wanted." The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler, who'd positioned himself as Emma's superior romantic choice, had revealed his true character the moment he actually had to provide the support and stability he'd criticized me for offering. He borrowed $300 from me the first week, then got mad when I asked for it back, and yesterday he told me I was just as controlling as you were, except at least you had money to back up your demands, Emma said, tears starting to flow as she realized how completely she'd misunderstood the dynamics of our relationship versus the fantasy Tyler had sold her. I listened without expression, watching her describe the natural consequences of choosing chaos over stability, manipulation over genuine care, and emotional manipulation over practical support, feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy for someone who'd made such a fundamental error in judgment. "The worst part is that I can't even finish my degree now," she sobbed, the full reality of her situation finally hitting her as she realized that her choices had consequences that extended far beyond relationship drama into concrete impacts on her future and career prospects. "Dr. Morrison says the scholarship funding was withdrawn and I need to pay $25,000 for my final semester, money I don't have and can't get because my credit is maxed out and Tyler certainly can't help with anything like that." I nodded slowly, unsurprised that she was only now understanding the financial infrastructure that had supported her dreams, the careful planning and investment that had made her graduate education possible while she focused on creative projects and artistic development. "And the internship at Morrison Design Group called to say there was some kind of conflict of interest and they can't honor the placement, which means I won't have the professional experience I need to get hired anywhere decent after graduation," assuming I can even afford to graduate at this point. The desperation in her voice was genuine now, not the manipulative tears she'd used during arguments about Tyler's behavior, but the real panic of someone who'd gambled everything on a relationship that collapsed within weeks under the pressure of actual responsibility and adult expectations. Richard Sterling also canceled my exhibition opportunity, something about withdrawn recommendations, and I don't understand how everything just disappeared so quickly when I thought these were opportunities I'd earned through my own merit and talent. I almost smiled at her naivety, the way she'd never connected the dots between my professional network, my reputation in the design community, and the doors that had opened for her during our relationship, opportunities that existed because people trusted my judgment and valued my recommendations. "Emma," I said quietly, my voice carrying the finality of someone who'd already made peace with this decision, "you chose Tyler over me, you defended him after he publicly humiliated me, and you demanded I apologize for exposing his jealousy and financial dependence. So why are you here expecting me to fix the consequences of your choice?" She stared at me with growing horror as she realized that this wasn't a negotiation or a plea for reconciliation. This was me calmly explaining why her former life no longer existed and wouldn't be restored regardless of how much she regretted her decisions. These weren't just random opportunities that happened to coincide with our relationship, they existed because I invested my professional reputation in your future, and when you chose to end our partnership, those investments were naturally withdrawn since they were based on trust and commitment that you decided to abandon. The silence stretched between us as Emma processed the full scope of what she'd lost, not just a boyfriend but an entire support system, financial foundation, and professional network that had been invisibly facilitating her dreams while she took everything for granted and focused on Tyler's romantic fantasies about authentic living and artistic integrity.